The Roman Centurion, written by Bernadette Guarneri, narrated by Bernadette Guarneri. Chapter 1, Beneath the Cross. He screamed, long and loud, screams that blended in with the sound of the crashing thunder that raced across the sky. Loins loose by fear, his armor rattling as if to keep pace with the sound of his knocking knees and trembling body. Crash! The thunderous sound rolled across the heavens, resounding and causing the earth to shiver as it dissipates. This storm was putting on a most spectacular show. Lightning flashed and darted from earth to sky and sky to ground, illuminating the dark heavens again and again. What or who had made the gods angry? He thought to himself as he looked around, trying to catch a glimpse of someone, anyone, in the dark. It was impossible to believe that it was only midday, how black as in the night the day had become. The hardened soldier had faced down armies of thousands without flinching. So why was he so afraid of a little rain, thunder, and lightning? Then a voice cried out. It could be heard above the sounds of the storm. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Those words pierced the heart of the man standing at attention, and his blood ran cold. The trembling intensified and his body shook as if hypothermia had set in. Once again looking around, this time trying to see how his fellow companions on duty were faring. At that exact moment, lightning lit up the sky, and he saw the face of a soldier closest to him. Bulging eyes, gaping mouth open in a scream, made songless by the roar of the wind. He wrapped his coat around his body as if the act could protect him from the elements of the day. The voice again above his head rang out, my God, why have you forsaken me? The soldier, he tried to look up, but the rain was falling hard. He had to close his eyes to avoid the water from falling into them. Another crack as the lightning lit the sky. Where was the mocking throng, who only a few hours earlier were screaming for the death of the prisoner in the middle of the storm? The storm came on suddenly. At first, the sun hid behind a cloud. Everyone thought it was temporary. But the day only got darker as the clouds gathered. Then the thunder could be heard far off in the distance before anyone realized the day had turned to night and the rain came down in torrents. Mostly everyone had left, driven by fear of the sudden storm, to seek shelter. As the onslaught from nature persisted, drowning anything that was not strong enough to withstand its deluge of water, he and his fellow centurions had to remain on duty. They had no choice but to stay and hold their position until their prisoners were dead. The wind was now a factor as the gusts grew and became stronger each minute. It wasn't just the strength of the wind, but the temperature, which seemed to have dropped 30 degrees in a matter of minutes. It sliced through every piece of clothing, including his armor, straight to his bones. Terror filled his heart. As it raced in fear, his adrenaline soared. He was in fight or flight mode, but there was no one to fight, and he was unable to flee. Terror rooted him firmly to the ground. His eyes stared into the dark as if willing and unknown to make an appearance. His main prisoner was no ordinary man. He had been his prisoner from the moment they arrested him in the Garden of Gethsemane. He watched his prisoner suffered at the hands of the governor, Pilate, and his fellow soldiers. The man took it with dignity and grace. Not even his expression changed. He never showed anger or fear at any time. He knew because he watched the prisoner closely. This Jew was exceptional. He took everything they threw at him and kept his head up high and walked with the demeanor of a king, except when stumbling in pain or under the load of the cross. What convinced him even more that this was no ordinary man was the fact that the leaders of the Jews and even the governor himself seemed to fear him. For the Jews, there was this unreasonable fear which drove them to do things even the soldier would have second thoughts of doing. And the governor? He couldn't wait to get rid of him and pass him on to another person to become their problem. They had abused him all night, and when he looked at them, there was sorrow and pity in his eyes, where there should have been anger and hatred. The Romans, well, they held the Jew in low regard. Any Jew with contempt, they held them and reveled in killing any of them. They were a defeated foe, so their lives did not matter. All the other slaves they crucified either cursed their way to the cross or whimpered and sniffled like pathetic men. But this one, he did neither. No words came from his lips. No words. No matter the cursing and the swearing that they threw at him. The soldiers had asked the prisoner a question. But the way he looked at him with eyes, his eyes seemed to pierce deep in his soul, eyes that seared his conscience and brought to remembrance many things he spent days drinking strong liquor to erase. That was why he struck him. That was why he struck his prisoner. He did not want him looking at him deep in his soul with those eyes which seemed to read his very thoughts. So in desperation, the Roman soldiers slapped his prisoner to break the hold that the prisoner's eyes seemed to have on him. At that moment, as his thoughts were pervading his mind, the thunder pealed again and screaming across the heavens, pulling him back into reality. It dragged the songs from beneath the earth, shaking the sky and the very soil the Centurion stood on. Voluntarily, he dropped to his knees. If the soldier could have seen who hid behind the clouds, he would have understood the reason for his fear and the dread that filled his soul, which seemed so unreasonable to him. You see, the Father, the eternal God, had come down to witness for himself the death of his Son. But for humanity's sake, for them to be able to endure his presence, God the Father had to hide behind the dark, stormy clouds. His presence caused the elements of earth, sea, and sky to tremble and convulse. The legions of evil angels and their leader had fled in terror from the infinite presence. Once again, the earth shook as the thunderstorm continued to make its presence felt. The gust of wind increased and the air, charged with electricity, danced around his body, bent almost over double, tense as a snake, coiled to strike. Only the danger was unknown and unseen. The soldier remained on his knees, head inclined slightly to the left, trying to avoid and keep the swirling debris out of his eyes. He heard the thunder rumbling in the far distance, but was not fooled this time, and braced his body for the reverberating shock of the song he knew was soon to come. And the heavens did not disappoint. Even with his eyes closed, he saw the lightning that lit up the canopy of the sky. Then it happened, and this was the biggest one yet. The explosion of thunder made his ears ring, and even though he was in a kneeling position, the vibration of the blast knocked him over to his side, and he lay there in a fetal position, whimpering in fear and praying to his God for this electrical storm to be over. Unashamed and unconcerned of how he might appear at that moment, because he knew anyone at all, out in this element was feeling the same way he felt right now, frozen in fear. And that's the end of chapter 1.